Welcome to the Talent Talks podcast from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I'm Alan Caesar. My guest today is Janet Grondin. She is the CEO of Stellar Solutions, a systems engineering firm specializing in space vehicle and launch systems. They do everything from telemetry subsystems to mission operations and strategic management. Janet is responsible for strategic management of their global aerospace portfolio. She previously worked for Northrop Grumman, which was her first private sector job after serving 26 years in the United States Air Force in both technical and leadership roles. She graduated from Embry-Riddle's Prescott campus in 1989 with a bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering. She also has several master's degrees from the Air Force Institute of Technology and the Air War College and the Air Command and Staff College. Janet, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Alan. This is a true pleasure and an honor to be here.
All right. Well, we'll start with our pre-launch. So we're at T-minus 4 questions. Are you buckled in?
I'm buckled in. Let's go.
What was your favorite place to spend leisure time when you were a student?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't have a whole lot of leisure time as an engineering student. When I did get a chance to get out, I really liked hiking around the area, down in Thumb Butte, around Willow Lake. And then when I could get away for the weekend or for a night or something, camping. And I camped with various different friends. We camped in some very remote places. Sometimes it was a lot of fun.
Cool. So you went like backpacking?
We did. Yeah. I remember taking one camping trip with a friend of mine. We were on some forest road somewhere. Probably wasn't even very smart, where we were just out, the two of us, and we just parked the car and pitched a tent and stayed there that night and got up the next day and kept going. We were just sort of, enjoying Arizona.
Yeah. The nighttime skies are just beautiful out there.
Mm-hmm, they definitely are.
Is there a particular song that takes you back to your Embry-Riddle days when you hear it?
Yeah, it has to be Danger Zone. It has to be, Tom Cruise. And yeah, so, when I went to Embry-Riddle, we started in 1984. Top Gun just came out. Everywhere, all over Prescott, young pilot students, in their leather jackets and on their pocket rockets, driving too fast. And it was always very nerve-wracking to drive around there, because between those guys that want to be Tom Cruise and then the retired community, you really didn't know whether you're going to be, behind somebody going 60 or somebody going 20. And it was kind of an interesting time to drive around Prescott. I suppose it still is.
Yeah, pretty high speed differentials there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what was your go-to late night meal or snack?
Well, let's see. Back then we had the cafeteria and we had a pizza place in the gymnasium. Those are the two places you could eat on campus besides the vending machine. After the cafeteria closed, the only thing open typically was the pizza place. And when you got a meal plan, you got a little card where you could get, I don't know what it was, like 30 or 40 pizzas a semester. We would pool our cards together sometimes and go get 3 or 4 pizzas. And they were, really not good, but we didn't care. We didn't care. It was what we could get. So that was kind of a favorite go-to place for us.
That's cool. What was a class or professor that had the sort of the longest lasting impact on you, either personally or in your career?
Well, Alan, this is the hardest question, that you can ask. I had so many great professors. I mean, Gary Harrison, I learned, aero from him. Dick Newcomb, he taught me how to do engineering drawing. Tracy Dorland was, really the man when it comes to aeronautical engineering. And then George and Marsu Haviland, they both taught me. George taught me design. Marsu taught me technical writing. But I think the most impactful really came out of the math department, John Jenkins. The way he taught math, he taught me to think logically, completely, and he gave us a lot of practical tips, which I used throughout my career, and I still use some of them today. One of the ones that he imparted on us was, he always told us, hey, when you come to a test, he goes, it doesn't matter how much you study, there's going to be something you really don't know. So he said, before you step into the classroom, think about what you know and think about what you don't know, and spend your time on the stuff you know. I still use that today when I have high-level meetings, or, you never have enough information, right? So I will pause and think, what do I know and what do I don't know? It still helps today. So John, I think, had the most impact on me in my career.
That's really interesting, because that's something that you hear. I remember hearing a lot from like classmates in high school, is like complaining about math class. Like, when am I ever going to use this? So it's really interesting to hear somebody say, here's a practical thing I got from a math course and a math professor. That's really
Hmm.
cool. And that's definitely an important piece of an important tip. So hopefully any students listening will take this note.
Oh, absolutely. I lived by it.
All right, so I want to talk about your work at Stellar Solutions, but first I'd like to kind of start with the Air Force. And I saw that you joined, just sort of a couple of years before Operation Desert Storm, which was sort of a heavily air operation. So I'm wondering, to what degree were you involved in that, and did you have any specific tasks related to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Alan. I did. So when Desert Storm kicked off, I was working at Tinker Air Force Base. I was a lieutenant, an engineer. I worked on the AWACS system, the E3, which is a big radar airplane with a big radar on it, and they use it to do air traffic management.
Is that the one that
When they're
has that like
deployed.
giant like UFO looking thing attached to the top of it?
That's the one. That's the
Okay,
one. Yep.
okay.
And so they deploy that out into. So in the case of Desert Storm, they deploy those first in many cases, so that they can get out there, set up the air environment, and vector in all the different planes that are coming from the Air Force, the Navy, allies, whatnot. So that it's really air traffic management in the sky, and of course, if somebody's going to shoot at an airplane, obviously they're going to communicate what they see there too. So there's quite a bit going on there with the AWACS. But I got to be, as a second lieutenant, an engineer on that platform. And, what I got to do was put together a quick, what they call it was a rapid prototype, essentially. At that time, the Air Force was using a radio called Have Quick. It was a frequency hopping radio that they shared, the Air Force and the AWACS team shared with multiple other users. It allowed the AWACS to talk to airplanes, as I was saying, from the Air Force and Navy, other countries, but they could frequency hop at the same rate and on the same frequencies, so they could communicate with each other. And it was a very important way to communicate so that the enemy couldn't hear. As we were kicking off Desert Storm, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, we need a structure to put in the airplane so that we can add the Have Quick radio to the AWACS, so they can direct traffic on secure communications." And he said, "I just need somebody to design it and to build a prototype. And then if the prototype works, we're going to fit the radio in it. If it works, we're going to build a bunch of them. We're going to send them on over." So that's what I got to do for Desert Storm. And it took me, I don't know, maybe a couple of days. I got to work in the machine shop with the guys that put the box together, and we verified that it worked, and they built a bunch and shipped them off. And that was my contribution to Desert Storm. So it was really kind of cool because, what I learned from that, honestly, was to leverage all of the things I learned at Embry-Riddle, because of, we have all those structures labs and all the different labs that I worked in. I brought that skill set to bear on active duty and on the mission, and that I was really proud of that.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So just to make sure I understand this correctly, so you've got the plane with the radar that's flying around.
Mhm.
Basically, is it basically acting as sort of like air traffic control, like
It
getting
is.
locations, everything?
It
Okay,
is.
and
Yep.
then everybody's communicating on radio frequencies, but you're changing frequencies constantly so that the enemy can't pick up more than snippets of information.
Correct.
And you
Yeah.
designed a thing so that everybody could coordinate their frequency hopping so they could stay in communication. Is it automated?
Well, now I didn't design the frequency hopping. I wish I did. I
Oh, okay.
didn't. I designed. No, I was a lieutenant, man. All I did was design a little box to put that frequency hopping radio in, so
Oh,
that
okay.
it could fit into the airplane. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If I designed the frequency hopping thing, then I would definitely. I would. I would probably not be available for this podcast. So I'd probably be on a private island somewhere spending all my money. Back in Desert Storm, one of the issues we had was really interoperability. So, this Have Quick was not actually a standard until everybody got over into Desert Storm and realized, well, that needed to be the communication standard. So there were a number of airplanes and other devices that I think required some kind of structure to put it into the actual aircraft so they could hook it up and use it. And that's essentially what I did. So it was just like a big metal frame so that it could slide into the rack and be usable.
That's still excellent. I don't mean to diminish your
No,
accomplishment.
it's okay.
That's awesome. Like
All
that in
right.
kind of integration is key, and like especially
Yeah.
for interoperability among different, government, what do you call it, military branches. So you spent 26 years in the Air Force, basically straight after graduating from Embry-Riddle. Do you have a favorite project that you worked on or job that you had in that span of time?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite project had to be GPS, so Global Positioning System. The job was at the right time in my career. I was a lieutenant colonel, so almost 20 years in, getting to be about 20 years in. And at that point, now I had the experience, I had the skill set, I had the leadership, and of course, the technical, underpinnings for my undergraduate and graduate degrees to actually do the job. And so I was assigned to be the program manager for the ground system. And what a lot of people don't know about GPS One is they don't really know that the Air Force buys it and the Air Force flies it, and now it's the Space Force. But what a lot of people also don't know is that the real brains of GPS is in the ground system. We use a Kalman filter to figure out the timing signal that's uploaded to the satellites and then beam back to Earth, and you use triangulation of those signals to be able to figure out where you are. Your user equipment, figures that out from the signals it gets from the satellites. And so GPS had been around for quite some time, and I think in Desert Storm really got its start. The ground system was getting old and needed to be replaced, and so I got to come in on the tail end of that program, put a new ground system in. Our 3-star, he said, it's kind of like replacing the engine on the car when you're driving 60 miles an hour down the road. So it was a lot of fun, and our whole metric for that whole experience was when we changed over to the new ground system, we didn't want any of our users to be impacted, and
Mhm.
we were successful in that. So it took us about a year and a half to get it all the way through the transition and into operations, but it was a resounding success because nothing negative happened. And then I followed that job with starting then on the next generation of that ground system almost right away. So that was a real career defining moment, to have those years in GPS.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and being able to pull off that kind of, sort of transition in equipment seamlessly. Like I've seen enough, organizations, tech organizations try to do something like that, just migrating content from, one server to another server. And, you run into issues just doing, it's a simple data move, but,
Hmm.
you end up with either sites slowing down or components don't work and so on. So one, that you're able to pull that off without negatively impacting the system. That's excellent. And yeah, the 60 miles an hour, replacing the engine at 60 miles an hour that sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Yeah. And I think that's where I learned. I really ended up in my dream job. I really learned that the right people, the right job, the right experience and technical background, but also a curiosity and an interest in the mission. When your heart's in it, you can go the extra mile. You can get amazing things done. So that whole project was way bigger than anybody on the team or even the team itself. And it was so much fun to be part of. And of course, it's always more fun to be part of a successful project, right? So, but that was a great. I really enjoyed that part of my career.
Do you mind if I dig in a little bit on the technical side of GPS?
Yeah, I,
Okay.
I'll go as deep as I can, Alan. So,
Okay, okay. I'm just like trying to fully understand what you're talking about with the ground
Mhm.
systems and the user, compared to your user device, your phone, your little GPS tracker that you carry around.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, so you have ground systems that are communicating with the satellites that help with the triangulation, and is your location on your personal device, is that basically comparing the signals that the other fixed ground stations are receiving, comparing them to yours? Is that what's going on?
No, it's a little different. It's a little different than that. So, at the heart of it, GPS is actually a timing signal, and so
Okay.
the timing signal is uploaded to the satellites. The satellites then turn and broadcast that back to the Earth. And so what your GPS unit is doing is it's getting that timing signal, but it's getting from multiple satellites, so it can triangulate your location. And let's say it's on your phone, right? You're looking at your GPS location through an app. Somebody has overlaid a map app. right? And now you see
Mhm.
a little blue dot. That blue dot is coming from triangulating multiple GPS satellite emissions, and that's how that works. And they need that upload every so often to find the true location of the satellite. When you upload, you're basically telling the satellite, okay, here's the most current information, and then over time it sort of degrades a little bit, and then you update it again. So it's the way the satellites understand where they are, maybe not in relation to each other, but in sense of time.
Okay.
So I think I'm probably getting beyond what I mean, I don't want to say something that isn't true from a, it is a timing signal. And so what happens is it'll get uploaded to the satellite, beams it to the ground, and then we do have stationary receivers that get that signal, and then they, from the timing signal coming from the satellite, they can figure out exactly where that satellite is, sends the information, basically says, okay, yeah, I heard from satellite A at this time, it sent this message. That information goes back to the ground segment, and the ground segment gets that from all of the stationary worldwide receivers, and then recalculates, okay, where are the satellites actually located, and how do they adjust the message, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, because it's all precision timing, like you said. And so knowing exactly where the satellite is relative to the fixed points on Earth.
That's how it works, right?
Okay.
Yeah, without the fixed points on Earth, it doesn't work.
I saw in the mid 90s you led a technical team that was reviewing design proposals for the new Delta IV rockets. Tell me, like, what did those proposals look like at that point, and like, what do you think about it from sort of an engineer's perspective?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I can tell you, working, early in my career, so I was a captain. I was only about 4 or 5 years into the Air Force, and previously I was working airplanes, which was really cool. I went kicking and screaming to space. I was like, I don't want to work space. But then they put me in a rocket program. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I might be able to enjoy that. So early work with rockets, launching, it was really a lot of fun. But I wanted more. So the first program they sent me to, really, they were launching GPS satellites. And so it was a lot of fun. I got to go to the Cape, I got to see that happen. But I wanted a little bit more. So I started looking around at, okay, what else can I do? And we were starting this Delta IV program. It was all about starting from a clean sheet approach. It was a new way of contracting. In the past, the government paid for everything, and then we kind of monitored what the contractors are doing. This time with Delta IV, they used a different, what they call a other transaction agreement. And essentially, both Lockheed Martin and, well, actually four, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, and I forget the fourth one now, but they all put their own money into designing this rocket, and then the government also put some money in. So what that meant was we were allowed to go down and watch them build design it and provide feedback back to the headshed in the government, but we weren't allowed, none of our team was allowed to actually help them figure out how to design it. And so that actually was pretty cool, because what I got to do was sit in a room with scientists from, I'm talking about the best guidance and control people in the world, the best structures people, the best propulsion people. This was top talent, because these companies were putting their own money in, and they wanted this to be successful. So I get to watch them build a rocket from scratch, basically, and talk to some of the people that were in the room when I was monitoring and assessing the rocket design, along with many technical support people that I had on my team. Some of those folks are running companies now that are launching rockets, and they're in charge, and it's pretty cool. Honestly, what I learned from that was you have to ask for your dream job sometimes, and sometimes you don't even know what it is. Like I said, I went kicking and screaming to space, and then they put me in rockets, which I thought was kind of cool. And then the next thing you know, I'm working with people that later are essentially running major parts of the space industry. So I would have never in a million years, when I was at Embry-Riddle, even scripted that future for myself. So you just have to sort of follow your curiosity sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm curious about the being in the Air Force for such a long span of time, and that there were a lot of sort of milestones in Air Force history while you were there, like Jeannie Leavitt becoming the first female fighter pilot in 1993. And I wonder if you noticed any changes in the culture around those milestones, or if you noticed any significant shift toward inclusion and diversity in your time there.
Yeah, Alan, I would say, first and foremost, our industry is really behind with diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was great to see, the first female fighter pilot. Honestly, when I graduated in 1989, I didn't think that I'd ever see that. So for it to happen just 4 years later was awesome, but we still have a ways to go. And, I think about my Embry-Riddle time and where we had international students, that was really something that now students desire that. And when they go look at a campus, and that's what they want to make sure they have diversity and international. It was something that Embry-Riddle was doing. I didn't even understand the value of it at the time. I had a roommate from Jamaica, friends from Hungary, from all over the world. And that gave me a perspective early in my life that I didn't realize, until later. And now I'm part of a company that's committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I draw on some of that early experience as an undergraduate, in military and industry engagement as well. But I understand why we need to bring in talent with diverse viewpoints. I like to think of what we do at Stellar, for example, is solving the hard problems. And they're just getting harder and harder. It was hard to get the space shuttle up. It was hard to get the Hubble up. It was hard to get the James Webb up. Now we're talking about going to the moon and Mars. Those are even more challenging. So, we need everybody to come to the table. And I think, while the space industry is really just exploding in all areas, commercial, government, the international scene, there's so many things going on that we need everybody pitching in. It's cool to be able to relate that back to, my experience in Embry-Riddle.
Yeah, yeah. And well, so I saw that, that Stellar Solutions being a woman-owned business in this industry that is majority male, and Celeste Ford being your founder, starting this company up in 1995, when, the gender disparity was even larger than it is now. And, with your experience in aerospace, do you find any differences about how Stellar is run than other places that you've worked? Is there anything specific about it that you can point to?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Alan. So, I don't know of any other company in our industry that really is all about putting people in their dream jobs and solving customer critical needs. That was Celeste's vision when she started the company 26 years ago, and it's still true today. It's still our vision. And what's even more unique, I think, is it's how we manage. We ask our employees, are you in your dream job? If not, what's it going to take? What do we need to do to get you in your dream job? And, you'll find that somebody might be in their dream job one day, and then situations change, and maybe they're curious about something new, and they go looking, in another program or something. They're, what, I think I want to do that. And then, so we work with them to get them where they want to go. That just doesn't happen in most companies. I don't know if it happens outside of our industry, because I really haven't done much outside of our industry, but I think we're unique in that fashion. And that's just traces right back to Celeste and her vision, years ago.
Yeah. Now, and Stellar Solutions has also won awards for best places to work, and so that's not the kind of thing that happens by accident, right? And so I imagine what you were just talking about is part of that. Can you talk about maybe what some other things that make this a great place to work, or kinds of things that you put into, running the business?
For many of the last 8 years, we've been the best small medium place to work for the Fortune 500 club, and we do win national, regional awards. Quite a few Silicon Valley awards, because that's where our headquarters is. That's where Celeste is located, and because of our, our innovative team. So we benchmark ourselves. One of the things you're asking, what do we do? Well, one of the things is we benchmark ourselves against high-performing companies. We want to be a high-performing company, not a high-performing small woman-owned business in space, right? We want to benchmark ourselves against everybody. And I think when we do that, we really strive in ways that maybe if we set the bar lower, we wouldn't, we wouldn't have some of the award-winning benefits, for example, that we have, or satisfied employees. So we do survey employees twice a year, once anonymously, once with their names attached. And we learn a lot from those surveys. We learn a lot from our customer surveys every year. And we take action and make sure that we address and cover down on the concerns that our employees and our customers have.
What's it like being a CEO versus being an engineer?
Well, I would say I've kind of become a systems engineer over time, and so I suppose I approached the CEO job as kind of a big systems engineering problem. If I were to really tell you how I do it, I think the biggest difference is when you have an engineering problem, you almost there's an answer somewhere.
Hmm.
You might have a technical glitch, or maybe a couple of parts don't mate well, or whatever the case may be. When you're dealing with people and customers and money and that type of thing, there's no answer in the back of the book. The systems engineering approach still works. You have to take everybody into account, but things change all the time. Just take a shift in the administration and where funding is going, right?
Mm.
So a great example is a lot of funding is going towards environmental now, with President Biden in office. And that's a shift from where funding was going for some of the same kinds of programs, where funding was going, a couple of years ago with the Trump administration. So it's something that you have to take into account, and you have to treat it as though you can't get excited about it, right? This is the way it is, and so you have to sort of understand the truth and deal with it.
Now, so I watched a bit of a keynote speech that you gave at the IEEE conference in 2021 on crossing boundaries,
Mhm.
and you started talking about sort of the software hardware boundary, and you expanded that to talk about sort of the changing meaning of the term astronaut, and how some astronauts are now, they're not flight test engineers anymore. They're, or not all of them are. There may be business people and wealthy individuals, and how that the change in the human profile of the space crew affects the type of controls or human machine interfaces that engineers need to consider when building spacecraft. Can you talk a bit about how you consider this in some project that you've worked on recently at Stellar?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say stellar in my entire career. So my career in the Air Force, really in space, was in the ground systems. A lot of people think about space, they think about the spacecraft. I think about the spacecraft as kind of a robot. They're really operated by people on the ground. I guess some could probably be autonomously operated, but you can't go out, you can't go change the oil on a satellite, right? You're just
Right.
not out there. Early in my career, we built those ground systems, or industry built those ground systems for, they thought about the operators kind of last. It was all about, hey, can I get the satellite to work? Can I get it on a launch vehicle? Can I get it up to orbit and actually have it work? And then somewhere along the line, they said, oh yeah, and somebody's going to have to decipher the information we get back from it. They didn't put any real thought into it. The early ground stations that I saw, they actually had ones and zeros sort of floating, across the screen, and a trained operator looking at those ones and zeros, they had to figure out if a bit was flipped somewhere to understand if the spacecraft was having an anomaly.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something to see. When I came on the scene, those were just starting to go away, and we were starting to bring in new things, which were more like file structures, what you might see on your laptop 20 years ago. And those poor 18-year-old airmen that were trying to fly the satellites, we're still delivering them stuff that was like 2 decades behind what they were used to seeing. So now, what I saw in my industry, my previous industry experience, and now at Stellar as well, that the industry is now thinking of the operator ahead of time, because now the operators aren't just really looking for anomalies, but some of them are also conducting military operations, and there's a lot more going on in space than there used to be. And so now we actually have the graphical interfaces built by people with a STEAM mindset, not just STEM, but also the arts, so that they can pull the truth data, digital truth data, out of the machine, so to speak, out of the computer, so to speak, and bring it to the forefront in an intuitive fashion, so operators can absorb way more information and be able to think and act more quickly based on what's being presented to them. So it's a much more interesting field than it used to be. That probably do build games and whatnot are perfect for this kind of work. And there's a lot of work like this out there. We have a lot of satellites on orbit.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to also ask you about sort of transitioning from the military to working at private companies. And I've heard that that can be a big adjustment. And I'm sure that a number of our alumni, as well as students who are listening, are either going through this right now or contemplating it in the future. And I wonder if that was difficult for you or not. And was there a moment when you thought, this is harder than I expected, this is easier than I expected? Is there a surprising moment for you?
Yeah, I've thought both that this is harder and this is easier. So it kind of depends on the moment. One of the things I learned coming into industry after the military is one of the differences is really how you empower people. My last job in the military, for example, I kind of had free reign to organize the way that I wanted. I flattened the organizational structure. I created an entrepreneurial environment, clarified roles and responsibilities, and that allowed me to push down a lot of decision making. Because when I first came into that job, I kind of looked around and some of the lieutenants were waiting for the lieutenant colonels to come out of the colonel's office to figure out what they're going to do next. I'm like, that's just not a fun job if you're a lieutenant. That's not the way we want to do it. So we ended up with a really dynamic organization. Project officers had their fingers on the reins of their hands on the reins of some projects, and they got some great experience. But it took getting that flattened organization structure and getting things moving a little bit quicker to make that happen. So a lot of those guys now and gals are now lieutenant colonels and GS-15s, and they're running the Space Force now, which is pretty cool. But what I took away from that, I mean, that's the way I wanted to work in industry. And my first attempt at that really didn't work well. It was not really compatible with the culture, and so I found that Stellar the culture was way more compatible with that particular experience and what I liked in the way of empowering people. I think because of that, when I joined, I kind of feel like I'm at home here, and to a large degree, it takes me back to my Embry-Riddle roots, where I remember standing in the structures lab and thinking, are they really going to let me run all this equipment without a professor here to look over my shoulder? And we were empowered, and we were encouraged to go work in the lab, stress test our specimens, hook up the wind tunnel, I think having that experience early before I even had a job was foundational for me, and I'm really happy to have had that start, and I'm really happy to be in a company where that's part of our culture. And so as a CEO now, I'm very protective of that part of our culture, because it is part of what inspires our employees to come to work every day.
That's really cool. And now there's one other sort of thing I wanted to know about is that, so English is my second language. And so the way that people talk is always fascinating to me. And I always feel like, especially out of my depth when I'm talking to people in the military, because, there's abbreviations, there's acronyms, there's all kinds of, rank structures that I don't know all that much about. And they're different for each branch. And it just feels very foreign. And while we're still speaking English, it still feels very foreign. And so I wonder if you felt that way going in the other direction. Is there language related to working in the private sector that was new to you, or something that you say? Did you ever say something, in a room and people looked at you like you had two heads?
Oh yeah, more than once. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's the worst feeling. You're like, what did I say? I used the wrong word, and I did learn that at certain places the language of the organization really matters. But again, I think I go back to the Embry-Riddle and the international aspect of Embry-Riddle, that early, and again, I didn't realize it at the time, right? But I learned early that people came to Embry-Riddle from various places in the world, different languages, and that collaboration can happen whether the communication is difficult or not. But you have to put like-minded people together that that want to solve the problems and want to figure it out. And if you treat each other with respect, and that's what helps get through that. Communication barriers should never really stand in the way, I don't think, of making progress and improving people's lives, because I think it takes patience. I hope no one ever makes you feel bad about not understanding the military jargon, because you're not a special person because you understand. It's just that that's where you happen to be most of your life. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean you don't have something to contribute. And I think that's something that I learned early was, make sure that communication barriers don't stop you from getting to know people and working with them.
All right. Well, you've worked all over the country, so I feel like I have to ask, LA or DC?
Yes.
Yes.
So you'll be happy to know that's a great question. I have a place in LA and a place in DC. So I think the answer is yes. I love them both. I can't pick.
Okay. Okay. What skills do you think are critical in succeeding in your line of work?
Well, I think I covered a few of those already, but
Mhm.
absolutely has to be leadership and technical skill. And I think, to add to that, a curiosity about, what you're doing so that you're constantly always looking for that dream job and making progress.
Yeah. And so if you could go back in time and give yourself, your younger self, a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I think it would be bold, be curious, be yourself. I look back on my younger days and I think, yeah, I really could have been more bold all along the way. That's what I would say. Don't hold back.
All right, Janet, are you ready for the splashdown?
I am.
What was that one experience that got your heart hooked on aerospace?
Well, I had to be flying with my dad. My dad was a private pilot. He built his own airplane
Oh, cool.
from scratch. Yeah, from plans, not a kit. And he built it. He started building it in our basement, and finished it up in a shop that he built specifically to finish that airplane up. And then in between, he would take me up in his Cessna. But eventually, I got to ride in it. It was a Starduster too, and it took him 17 years to build that plane. But it was, yeah. I shared that love, and I think really just the incredible sense of I don't know, human accomplishment when it
Yeah.
comes terms to to be able to fly. It just when you look at an airplane, you think I shouldn't be able to fly, but they do. And we all know why. I have a degree in why that works, right? But
Right.
it's still every airplane I see in the air is still something is a beauty to behold, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you can see that here on campus as well. Whenever any airplane is going overhead, the students would look up into even people come out of the office when they hear something unusual, and have a look at see what's flying overhead. As we're recording this, the Daytona 500 was this past weekend, and so of course the fighter jets are going over for it, and they're doing practice flights over it. So people are regularly going outside, and I was working on my car and I saw one of them going right over my house. Like, that's awesome.
I still do that. If I hear a plane, I'm like, I can't not look up. It's just what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So what's a book that's been important or influential for you?
So that's a great question. The one that I picked for today is a book called Execution. It's by Larry Cassidy and Ram Charan. And the reason I like this book is they define the term execution, and I can't remember the exact definition, but what it boils down to is, execution is about discovering the truth and acting on it, which I think is great for any endeavor in your life. If you don't know the truth, how can you choose the right path to go fix something, to go build something? That's stuck with me through all of the different jobs that I've had and projects that I've worked on. That and sometimes you uncover the truth and you don't really want to deal with it, right? So the other piece of it, acting on it, sometimes can be hard. At the end of the day, you need both pieces to really make progress.
Yeah. So who's your favorite cartoon character to completely turn it around on you?
It has to be Elastigirl in The Incredibles, Holly
Oh
Hunter.
yeah.
I want to be able to do that, stretch from, the moon to the earth. She's amazing. So I love Holly Hunter. She's great. But Elastigirl is fantastic. It was a perfect persona for her. And I'd love for it to be my persona.
Yeah, yeah. It was really great. I couldn't see that and not see some sort of echo of like, it indicates how much is expected of moms and women. That they need to be flexible enough to do everything and stretch to do everything. And I thought that was, interesting way to sort of visualize that in a superpower.
I would agree. I think that's exactly what a lot of women feel like. We're starting to work together to make that not be the case for everybody, but it's a lot, and it's great to have a family, great to have a career. But yeah, sometimes you stretch a little thin, but we all make it work because we want to.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have a lot of support, I will say. So most of us have quite a bit of support.
That's good. That's good. Now, if you can go to the Olympics and compete in any sport, what would you choose?
Well, that's easy. Bobsledding. So,
Yeah.
yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, it's that combination of you get to go fast, which everybody in aviation wants to go fast, of course. And, you got to be technically accurate because it's pretty unforgiving, sport. But you get to use your whole body, your brain, your whole body. And it just looks like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah. Bobsled is a little bit more forgiving than like the skeleton though, where you're going face first on that little
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, I didn't pick that one. I've taken some face plants in my day, and I'm not. That didn't look like it's quite as much fun.
Right. All right. So if you could live for a week as any person in history, who would it be?
I think it would be Martin Luther King Jr. I just finished reading a couple of his books. It's interesting because I've celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day many times, and this year I thought I need to read really his writings, and I did early, when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've been through part of my career and reading some of his books, I just have so much more of an appreciation of what he did. That when he was leading in our nation's history, that really transformation of the country we were and now the country that we are becoming really started with him. He didn't just change people's lives in that period of time. He's changed the course of history and lives forever. So I would just love to know what that feels like. If I could be in his shoes for even just a few days, I'd love to know what that feels like. Reading his books, he understood, I think, the impact he was having on future generations. I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah, that is certainly a pivotal figure in history. Well, thanks very much, Janet. That's the last thing I've got for you. Thanks for joining us for the Talon Talks podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Alan. It was really a pleasure, and go Eagles.
Go Eagles. This episode of Talon Talks is a production of the Embry-Riddle Office of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement and the students at WIKD Radio. We're coming at you from my office at Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach, Florida. And Janet, where are we reaching you?
Chantilly, Virginia.
Excellent. This episode was recorded by me and edited by Cindy Puckett and the students at Wicked. Michelle Day is our program manager. Edmund Odarte is Executive Director of Alumni Engagement, and Tony Brown is Executive Director of Communications. Please send us your thoughts about our show. Visit alumni.erau.edu/podcast and click the feedback link. I read all your messages. Thanks for downloading us. We'll see you next time.